Today we shall talk about the management of acute pancreatitis, management of complications that is caused by acute pancreatitis like collections, necrosis, vascular complication, extra pancreatic complications and so on. I think you are well versed with what I have spoken yesterday. It is following that we are going with the management part of it. Initial management of acute pancreatitis, that is with pain reliever, nil by mouth and so on. Management of the local complications like acute pancreatic fluid collection, acute necrotic collection, pseudocyst, walled off necrosis, management of vascular complications like splenic or superior main thrombosis. One more thing left is the superior mesenteric artery thrombosis, pseudoaneurysms, hemosuccus pancreaticus, management of gut-related complications. Under these four headings, with 7 to 8 subheadings, we are going to talk about the management of acute pancreatitis. Today, I'll go slowly, try to understand. We'll send you the PPT if possible by the end of the lecture. Am I correct? Okay. Initial management. We are using non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like paracetamol or some of the diclofenac and aceclofenac thing, tramadol and so on. If that is not working out, we are going to the opioids. Opioids is currently the drug of choice for pain management who has not gone for dependency on the drug. There has been interest in the potential role of epidural analgesia, particularly in patients with severe acute pancreatitis and chronic pancreatitis. We can take the patient if the coagulation profile is normal for that patient. You have to do an INR. If that is normal, you can go for an epidural analgesia in the form of continuous epidural, now and then topping up when the patient goes for pain. That gives a good recovery for the patient, a moral booster, and he tries to become all right. The sheet anchor of the treatment of acute pancreatitis to start with is fluid therapy. Why? Because there is a great loss of fluid in the third space because of the vascular paralysis, capillary paralysis, inflammatory reaction, which causes extravasation of fluid. The third space, especially into the peritoneal cavity and also in the retroperitoneal space and subsequently entering into the pleural space. So the sheet anchor of treatment is fluid because if you don't maintain the volume of circulation, the perfusion of the organs comes down. Because the perfusion of the organ comes down, they go in for failure. Something like the kidney going in for failure. So multi-organ failure will result if you don't maintain the volume. So it reduces the systemic inflammatory response, syndrome and organ failure. But is there anything to prove that the fluid therapy? But except in certain cases, it has not been proved beyond doubt the fluid therapy is a must. But in our clinical practice and experience, we are really benefited by giving a fluid challenge for the patient. The only thing is, there is a limited evidence regarding the type of the fluid, whether it's a crystalloid or a colloid, volume, rate of delivery, and how to confirm the perfusion is established. So volume resuscitation remains the holy grail of critical care. The colloid versus crystalloid debate is moving in favor of crystalloid. The best solution will be a ringer lactate solution at the rate of 5 to 10 milligram per kilogram body weight per hour. Physiological responses to fluid administration needs to be assessed now and then. Now comes the important part. The earlier you start the nutrition, the earlier they become. The best form of nutrition would be an enteral nutrition in some form or the other. If the patient is not able to tolerate it due to an ileus, there is gastroparesis because of the collection behind the stomach. There is certain amount of ascites which is preventing the mobility of the gut. Then you are compelled to go in for a parenteral therapy. Otherwise, an enteral route is the best, which contributes to the gut barrier function and reduce the bacterial translocation. If you collect back your anatomy, the transverse colon is very nearby to the pancreas. So the translocation of the bacteria is quite common. What is a sterile collection can get into an infected collection. One of the route is a translocation of the bacteria. That can be prevented by the gut barrier function, which is done by the enteral nutrition. Gastric colonization of the pathogenic bacteria is reduced when the enteral nutrition support is given, and it is quite cheaper and easier to administer. Nasogastric group is well tolerated. The only thing is there is a question whether we will be stimulating the pancreas by giving a nasogastric thing. So some people have got a knack of putting a nasojejunal feeding and feed it. In case there is a gastroparesis, nasojejunal feeding will be good. You must try either one. Due to gastric stasis in ileus, about 0.5% to 1% of the patients do not accept your enteral feed. And if there is a GI fistula due to the extra pancreatic involvement, the whole thing comes out. Huh? No. Total parenteral is reserved for only those patients. But the above patients who are not agreeing, there is a GI fistula going for a parenteral nutrition. The complex parenteral nutrition, oh, you're not telling anything about the parenteral nutrition. No. No, what I'm saying, after parenteral nutrition, you are not saying. No, the complications of the parenteral nutrition are, they go in for infection of the parenteral route. Before, some people go in for a disseminated intravascular coagulation. To maintain the channel is difficult. So some of them are peripherally given, some of them are centrally given. These are the setbacks of parenteral nutrition. There is always a possibility if you put the patient on prolonged parenteral nutrition, the patient is likely to go in for gallstone disease. So that is what it is. Correct? Correct. Now antibiotics. There is no role of prophylactic antibiotic. Only when there is a suggestion of infection in the form of fever, in the form of leukocytosis, in the form of organ failure, then you give antibiotics. A prophylactic antibiotic has got no role and it has not been proved. It can be started in the 2nd or 4th week when the necrosis is there for a longer period. Chance of getting infected either through the hematogenous circulating the bacteria or translocation of the bacteria from the gut is likely to infect. There you may give. Infection occurs in 40% of the people are necrosis. So again, I'm telling you, there is no role of prophylactic antibiotics. Either it has got anything on the mortality rate or on the morbidity rate. So Working Group 2013 guidelines, routine use of antibiotic is not recommended. Prophylaxis in severe acute pancreatitis as per the latest Atlanta is debatable. Therapeutic antibiotics are given when there is an obstruction to the biliary tree which is causing cholangitis, which will be seen in the form of a dilated CBD or a mild centrally dilated IHBRD, or a leukocytosis, or a fever with rigor, and an impacted stone lower down. So these are the things. Tells you that there is a coexisting cholangitis. If you don't treat it with heavier antibiotics, you are likely to lose your patient. So the role of antibiotic is due to coexisting cholangitis. There is no role of selective gut decontamination. Originally, when I was a student, we used to give neomycin detention enema, neomycin by oral flagyl, and they've got no role now. There is no role of probiotic therapy also. So as far as this, you be very clear, this is what it is. Oh, ERCP, where does that? ERCP is helpful in gallstone pancreatitis. If the stone is getting stented at the ampulla of Vater, causing a biliary reflux into the pancreas and exaggerating the pancreatitis, or progression of the pancreatitis is very fast, patient has got unrelentless pain, then only you must put an ERCP, which should always be used in the form of removal of the stone and draining of the biliary tract, so that the coexisting cholangitis also comes down. I have seen any number of cases where the stone is stenting at the ampulla of Vater, causing relentless pain. The moment you make a neck of the ampulla and let out that, the whole thing comes down, the patient becomes comfortable. Acute pancreatitis with jaundice, that's what I'm saying. Acute pancreatitis, jaundice from systemic inflammatory response syndrome, highly suggestive of cholangitis. There is a definitive role of an early ERCP, which is therapeutic in nature, which go along with the sphincterotomy and stenting of the biliary tree. Let's be very clear. AP, acute pancreatitis plus jaundice minus SIRS. ERCP is only indicated if there is evidence of an obstructive jaundice, and slowly the patient is getting shifted from non-cholangitic phase to a cholangitic phase. Otherwise, it has got no role. The local complication yesterday, if you remember, this is yesterday's slide, less than 4 weeks, acute pancreatic fluid collection. Less than 4 weeks, acute necrotic collection if there is necrosis present. More than 4 weeks, pancreatic pseudocyst. More than 4 weeks, if there is necrosis, it becomes walled-off necrosis. There is nothing but the repetition of the yesterday's slide. Each collection may be sterile or infected. Broad management and outline of pancreatic collection. If the patient is symptomatic or infected, there is an acute fluid collection or acute necrotic collection. You can do a percutaneous drainage by placing a pigtail catheter. In most of the cases, they become all right. Subsequently, some patients may go in for, if there is an acute pancreatic fluid collection alone, you can go in for a pseudocyst. It is managed by cystogastroscopy or managed according to the nearity of the available hollow viscus, either in the form of cystogyroidostomy or a cystojejunectomy. Depends on where it is pointing. Pancreatic necrosis or walled-off necrosis must be managed by necrosectomy, either by an endoscopic route or by a minimal invasive or by ward and so on. I'll talk to you subsequently. Today's class I'm going to take a little long because I want to finish it today and tomorrow go on to a different topic. Surgical intervention of the necrosis is in the first 2 weeks to be avoided until otherwise it is infected. Walled-off necrosis eventually require an intervention. Acute necrotic collection only if secondarily infected, suggestive of presence of gas. But this presence of gas can be present without an infection also. That we must keep it in mind. And you can see in this CT, there is a lot of air, there is a necrotic material, and because of the fluid, there is an air fluid level. Above is the stomach. What should we do? We can easily do a cystogastrostomy. Open it nicely, pull out everything, put a drain and come out. Now you must know there is a landmark paper called Panther Trial, which has changed the complete outlook in treating the complications of pancreatic necrosis. It's called pancreatitis necrosectomy versus step-up approach. A pancreatic necrosectomy is done immediately by opening the abdomen, but they have slowly shifted to a step-up approach, initially to do a cutaneous drainage, percutaneous drainage, then enlarge it, then do a minimally invasive or a ward or an open necrosectomy. So that is called Panther Trial. It's one of the landmark paper. They've done open 45, out of which 44 laparotomy. The other one is VARD, is nothing but video-assisted retroperitoneal debridement of the necrosed portion of the pancreas. That depends on whether it points posteriorly or not. We'll have to repeat the procedure in 9 cases. 5 cases, drainage alone subsequently will suffice. Step up approach is nothing but first put a percutaneous drain, then drainage, enlarge it, put a minimal invasive and so on. Step by step we go up. Finally, you may land with the open necrosectomy also. 41 treated with percutaneous drainage alone. 2 endoscopic procedures like an endoscopic cystogastrostomy and so on. 9 patients required the second drainage because the one of the drain is not draining well because of the thick material. 4 cases had WAD, video-assisted retroperitoneal debridement, and 2 patients had open. So this is what the whole paper is about. 35% of the patients have been treated with percutaneous drainage only. So the problem with that is decreased combo endpoints, new onset multiple organ failure, incisional hernia, less of new onset diabetes, use of pancreatic enzyme versus cost is less. These are the plus points, plus advantages of the percutaneous drainage only. This arrow shows less in number of new onset diabetes, something like that. Am I clear so far? Am I clear so far? Raise your hand. Now step-up approach. Percutaneous CT guided drainage catheters. Then you go in for a minimally invasive debridement. If no improvement occurs in 72 hours, it can be a minimally invasive retroperitoneal necrosectomy, pancreatic retroperitoneal necrosectomy, where our laparoscopic instruments are used, where a video assisted, they're video and manual both. It's called WARD, video assisted retroperitoneal debridement of the necrotic tissue. If both are not working out, you either go for a lap or open necrosectomy. This is what the step-up approach is. The choice of the initial drainage position is based on the position of the collection related to the other organs. You are safe if it is collecting on either flank posteriorly. You are not safe if it is in the medial side because you have to go through many of the organs. Lateral collection from left or right flank, the best place to do it and do subsequent surgery. Medial collections are better done to an endoscopic route, either through the stomach. Some people even done a duodenum this thing, but it's a failure. In the extremities, ultrasound guided puncture can be done. Sometimes it can present as a psoas abscess. Sometimes it's so many things that can happen. Combination of endoscopic and percutaneous can also be used. But the commonest thing being flank drainage medial collection, endoscopic route, or an open route. Now you can see, in this case, we have placed a stent. This is one of our case. How big was the collection, you can see. Now we have placed a drain. You can see the drain into a collection. Slowly, all these collections are becoming lower, and it has come very much less. And this has got a little collection. Now, absolutely there is no collection when we are going to try to pull out the percutaneous catheter. See, that's what I'm trying to say. About 35 to 40% of the people require only a properly done percutaneous drainage. After that, out of that, so about 60% of the people can go in for ward or minimal action, minimally invasive retroperitoneal debridement. Retroperitoneal, minimally invasive, I have already told about this to you. This is how it's being done. This is we have taken from the net. We didn't do any video assisted thing in our unit, but this is what it is. You can see there is the percutaneous, then insertion of the cannula, then insertion of the video, this thing, or the laparoscopic instrument, and then put a pigtail, correct? Management of pseudocysts. Be patient, I'll finish it quickly because it's a little long topic. Cystogastroscopy is the gold standard. Why? Because an open cystogastroscopy is the gold standard. Why? Because sometimes you get necrosis that has not been picked up by your CT. So under vision you are doing, you are careful, you will not meddle with any vessel, bleeding complications are less. So this is how we have opened in the midline, we have opened the stomach anterior wall, we could see the posterior wall where there is a cyst. And we have opened that cyst, the fluid is gushing out. Always take a biopsy of this wall. That's a must to rule out any malignancy in case it is there. It is not been there. In case it is there, you'll have to do a biopsy and you'll have to suture like a hydrocele sac after reversion so that the bleeding from the cut edges are not there. Then close the stomach, drain with the rice tube drainage. That's all. This is the procedure. It's very easily done and one should know how to do it. Only one thing, this incision should not be too near the gastric curve or near the lesser curve. Then you are likely to injure a lot of vessel. It should be dead over the body where it is pointing. This is laparoscopy. They open the anterior wall of the stomach. They are going, this is the cyst. They will empty and do it off. This is Kripalani slide. We can take it from here. Management of pancreatic necrosis and ward of necrosis. One more thing I want to tell you here is, which is not shown here, even endoscopically you can drainage. If it's a very clear fluid, if you are very clear, pass an endoscope, do a cystogastroscopy, 2 or 3 stents, so that it will drain nicely. That is not shown here. Management of pancreatic necrosis and ward of necrosis. You must know when to intervene. If there is infection, either suspected radiologically by the presence of gas, or more than 60% of the gland is gone, or the clinical picture is in favor that the patient is going in for organ failure, then you will have to intervene. Nutritional failure. The patient is there with you for 1 month, you are not improving. Whenever you start oral feeds, you go in for ileus. You have to keep him for prolonged parenteral nutrition. That case also you do it off. Persistent abdominal pain with a cross-sectional imaging showing a definitive loculated vault of necrosis. Then these are the place where you will have to intervene. Procedures: endoscopic, ultrasound-guided cystogastroscopy and necrosectomy. That's being done in our medical GE department. If they fail in that, if it is not draining properly, then they will give it to us. Then we will do a proper necrosectomy. Then is a laparoscopic surgical necrosectomy is coming in a very big way. But open surgical necrosectomy is the final answer if you want to do a good job. What is the difference between laparoscopy and open? Open, you can have a good vision. You can break out all the loculi. Even in laparoscopy, you'll have a good vision. But when you're trying to pull out the necrotic material, the correct pressure your fingers will sense. Whenever there is little tightness, that means there is underneath vessel, you should not do it. Keep a drain, it will come on its own. So take a sponge holding, do like that moment. Whatever comes, you take it, usually it come out nicely. But both laparoscopy and open surgical are good in the hands who are trained to do that procedure correctly. The endoscopic ultrasound, cystogastrostomy and necrosectomy. There are two trials, Penguin and Tension trial. Both are same. Where they do an endo ultrasound means, if it is not pointing out well into the stomach, then they will have to do an endo ultrasound and find out where exactly the maximum pointing out and what is the thickness of the wall between the pseudocyst and the pointing things. And it should be minimum of 1 to 1.5 centimeter. Then only you are safe. Currently, laparoscopic or open approaches are preferred over endoscopic approaches because thickness of the necrotic material, minimal access to them because they are not able to see properly. An endoscopic procedure for necrosectomy is occasionally give you a good result. Otherwise, you must go for these two only. Open necrosectomy, there's so many ways. Open packing, close pack and close and come, continuous drainage with this thing was. But I am doing in my department the programmed open necrosectomy. I don't mind reopening again and again. In 2-3 sittings, the patient becomes totally all right, no complication. The patient is with you, whereas the other things, the open packing will go in for sinusitis and fistula of the nearby hollow viscus. Closed packing will go in for sepsis. With continuous drainage, it is an old procedure and nobody is following nowadays. A programmed open necrosectomy with repeated reopening is the best to do under circumstances. So this is what the open necrosectomy is. You can see that we have completely opened up the lesser set. You can see the necrotic material, momentum reflected, a gastrocolic window is created. And now we had 2 cases where the necrosis was pointing near the root of the transverse mesocolon, where to the right of it were the superior mesenteric artery. The superior mesenteric artery will come here. It will supply the first part of the duodenum by the first jejunal branch. Sorry. How to go? Back. This is the one. Yes. That's all. So you will have to be very careful here, because if you carefully see, this is the 4th part of the duodenum, becoming a jejunum. This is the 3rd part, underneath which the superior mesenteric artery and the vein are going. You have to be very careful, and it usually gives the first jejunal branch here. So when you are approaching here, you'll have to take care of the first jejunal branch. Otherwise, you'll have a little nasty bleeding, which has to be controlled by a suture alone. Okay, this is what it is. This is one of the cases where we have done like that. So this is near, where is that which I have done one here. That picture is not there. We have to open and do it off. This is for the right and left colon. If it is involved the root of the transverse colon, the radius needs to be eccentric. Same thing. This is the 3rd part of the duodenum. Yes. Yeah, next. Yeah, next step. Right paracolic. No. This is what we do when it is the transverse mesocolon root. Now, if there is extension on the left paracolic gutter or the right paracolic gutter, you will have to mobilize the colon as you do for hemicolectomy and drain that. Then you can debride all the necrotic tissue, keep this thing, drain and come out. Don't use force. You are likely to injure the blood vessels. And if it is not coming out easily, you can also forcibly spray the water so that some of the debris can float out and come back, and never use a power there. This is almost outdated, nobody is doing nowadays, but except in few conditions where it is only kept for draining, not for washing. We also have done a couple of cases, they have done well. Early systemic inflammatory response syndrome, acute or delayed hemorrhage, enteric fistulization. Late pancreatic fistulization, sometimes the tail of the pancreas will get necrosed or part of the pancreas will get necrosed and it will come out. So it will lead to a pancreatic fistula. That's a separate topic. We'll talk sometime later. Now, what are the vascular complications that can occur? The vascular complications that can occur are a pseudo aneurysm formation with a bleed, or it can go for a mesenteric splenic vein thrombosis. If it's splenic vein alone, it can cause a transient sinistral port-like hypertension. If it is in a mesenteric vein, usually they become alright, but do not go for necrosis. And the other important complication is a mesenteric arterial thrombosis. These are the vascular complications. We will discuss one by one. Hemosuccus pancreatitis is nothing but the blood is leaking into the pancreatic duct and it is thrown through the ampulla of beta. So it is called hemosuccus pancreatitis. The patient will have either hematemesis or melena, melena being more common. The patient will have upper abdominal pain because of the enlarging pseudoaneurysm. Upper GI endoscopy is preferable. Is side being scoped. A Doppler ultrasonogram will tell you about the vascular tree nearby that area in the lesser set that also can find out an aneurysm or not. CECT is the best to find out whether there is any leak. And finally, we do an angiography. An angiography is always combined with a therapeutic modality. Otherwise, CET alone suffice to tell you where are you. If you are prepared to do a prophylactic emboli into one of the bleeding vessels, then you can do an angiography. Now, you can see nicely the blood coming out of the ampulla of beta. In this case, you have done endoscopic tamponade is not useful at all. You will have to do an angioembolization. If it is not possible, then you will have to go for surgery, either in the form of a bleeding vessel ligation if it's possible, or going for a pancreatic resection. That you can see nicely, the splenic artery aneurysm, it occurs in 40% of the cases. And the other one is a gastroduodenal artery. Clinical features depends on the size of aneurysm, but it is not a dominant feature whether it will go into rupture or not. Sudden exacerbation of abdominal pain, distension, clinical signs of blood loss in the form of hemodynamic instability must give you a caution that the patient is going for a bleed. So this is the aneurysm. Arterial and venous vessels are right by that side. This is the pseudoaneurysm rising the splenic artery. This is the main splenic artery. This is a conventional angiography. If hemodynamically unstable, immediate surgery is the gold standard. Even before that, if there is a good interventionist, you embolize and then take the patient for surgery. If hemodynamically stable, transcatheter embolization, not amenable to transcatheter embolization, then you go in for an emergency surgery. If nothing is possible, pack it and come. So our experience, 2 cases of pseudoaneurysm splenic artery, one in acute or chronic pancreatitis. Intervention radiology we could manage. One is from the left gastroepiploic artery. The other one is from the splenic artery. Right? You can see how the aneurysm, you can see how the coils are being lodged. Now the aneurysm leak is not at all there. Another one is splenic vein thrombosis, very common in an acute pancreatitis. Many of the time we do not notice it, but 10 to 40% of the cases we will be able to diagnose it. It can lead to a sinistral portal hypertension for a temporary period. After that, the recanalization of the vein takes place once the vein pathology is solved. During that, if the patient do have any problem, then we treat that also. Splenic vein thrombosis, it can cause left-sided portal hypertension, gastric varices, that's called sinistral portal hypertension. Treated by splenectomy if it prolongs, if the thrombosis is not coming down, if there are fundal varices. Then once the patient settles down, you can do a splenectomy. But during CT scan can tell you, you can see the nice thrombosis of the whole of the splenic vein. Central lower retination extensively enhancing. Okay. Next, treatment asymptomatic patient without varices, anticoagulation in the form of heparin to start with, then continue with warfarin. Splenectomy in symptomatic patient, if they develop gastric varices, bleeding, and so on, it's very highly effective. Superior mesenteric vein thrombosis, it can occur, but to my experience, it does not occur to the level of causing gangrene of the bowel, except in 1 or 2 cases where you have to resect the bowel. Otherwise, they become all right. The moment you suspect a splenic vein thrombosis extending on to the superior mesenteric vein, you will have to start the patient on anticoagulant therapy and observe the INR every 48 hours. You do an INR. Accordingly, you you titrate the dose of the what is that? So, warfarin sodium, and then you make it all right. Now, one important thing here is, apart from the mesenteric vein thrombosis, there is mesenteric artery thrombosis also. Mesenteric artery thrombosis, the patient has excruciating pain. Then if you take a Doppler or do a CT, the mesenteric vein thrombosis, mesenteric artery thrombosis will be seen. The outcome of mesenteric artery thrombosis, you must start the patient immediately on heparin, warfarin sodium, titrate the dose of warfarin sodium. The INR should be kept anywhere between 2.5 to 3. Then continue the patient with that. The complication, they can go in for a massive hemorrhage from that area due to an ulceration of the mucosa. They can go in for gangrene of the bowel. They can go in for a perforation subsequent to a minute area of ischemia. If you leave it, the patient is likely to go in for a stricture at a later date, where you may have to resect an anastomosis. So the outcome of mesenteric artery thrombosis can be a bleed, can be silent, can be a bleed, can be a perforation, can lead on to an obstruction, either an acute or a chronic obstruction, where you require to resect the bowel. This is what it happens. Treatment, this I almost told you everything. Gut complications. Sometimes the pancreatitis can extend onto the nearby colon. It can cause thrombosis in all the vessels because there is a long mesocolon and it's very nearby. The patient can go in for complete gangrene of the transverse colon, where he'll have to resect the transverse colon and do a stoma and an endostomy. End stoma with a mucus fistula, and subsequently you can make the patient all right at a later date when he is completely stabilized. This is how it is. Bowel-related complication, mechanical obstruction, perforation, intracutaneous fistula, and bowel gangrene. This is one of our case. Diverticulitis resolves easily. Mechanical obstruction can be tackled if it's due to a pressure by a nearby collection like a pseudofist. Bowel perforation and gangrene requires a laparotomy, lavage and stoma, and we always do a laparostomy. Don't close the abdomen at all, but it has got a very high morbidity and mortality. I think it is little vast today. In a nutshell, I would like to talk to you for 5 minutes. The first management is pain management. To start with NSAIDs, then go on to opioids. Opioids is the gold standard now. Don't go further. Fluid resuscitation is important. It's a sheet anchor of the treatment to prevent cysts and also fill in the volume of the blood vessels, as there is extensive third space loss due to retroperitoneal loss due to inflammation and capillary paralysis. So you'll have to keep the volume intact so that all the organs are preserved. Then depends on the collections. If there is an acute fluid collection, not infected, less than 4 weeks, observed, they become all right. If it is not becoming all right within 4 weeks, or if it is getting infected, or if it's nearer surface, a good window, put a percutaneous catheter and drain it off, they do well. If there is a pseudocyst, you can either do a cystogastrostomy in the form of endoscopic procedure, or in the form of open procedure, or in the form of a laparoscopic procedure. Anything can be done. If it is pointing elsewhere to the duodenum or a jejunum, you can either do a cystoduodenostomy or a cystojejunectomy. This is for the pseudocyst. And necrosis, an acute necrotic collection should always be drained. If the patient is not improving, there is a constant pain after 2 weeks, the patient is not thriving well, you will have to do it. The best way to do it is a percutaneous drainage. And subsequently, usually they become all right. If they are not becoming all right, wait for some time, and then you can do one of the procedures. Depends on where it points out. If it is the retroperitoneum, either do a ward or a minimal invasive procedure, that is called step up. If it is in the medial tract, then you try to do it with an endoscopic procedure. If not possible, open and do it. If there is a failure of ward and minimal invasive, you open and do it. This is what, in nutshell. Then the bleeding complication I told you, it can be due to a pseudoaneurysm bleed, the common being the splenic artery, the next being the gastroduodenal artery, the next being the gastroepiploic artery, left side. Best thing is, if it's stable, do an embolization and watch. If not stable, take the patient to surgery. If there's a little breathing space, embolize and then take it to surgery, the patient outcome will be good. It usually presents in the form of a hematemesis or melena and a deranged hemodynamic stability. That's an acute pain. This will tell you the patient is bleeding. The other vascular complication is the splenic vein thrombosis. Wait, usually they become all right. Put the patient on heparin, or then you put the patient on azithromycin, tighten the dose, maintain the INR between 2.5 and 3. Usually they become all right. If they don't become all right, subsequently develop varices, then you can do a splenectomy at a later date. Mesenteric vein thrombosis usually becomes all right on its own by this anticoagulant therapy. Occasionally, it may go in for a gangrene perforation where you have to resect and do no primary anastomosis and endostomy with a mucus fistula, and subsequently take the patient for surgery. The next is a mesenteric arterial occlusion, which can go either in for a bleed or a perforation or gangrene, or at a later date can go in for a stricture, and you have to treat accordingly. The sheet arrancar of treatment is the moment the patient is showing evidence that there is an obstruction of the vessels, you must start the patient on heparinize the patient, and subsequently give the patient, put the patient on the warfarin sodium, titrate it, maintain the INR between 1.8 to 2.5 to 3. That is all about it. If there is an extra pancreatic complication like necrosis of the bowel and so on, depending on what gut is necrosed, try to resect it. If it's a proximal jejunum, then you'll have to do a primary anastomosis. Otherwise, the patient is likely to go in for a high output fistula. If they are doing it, you do a distal feeding jejunostomy so that you can start the feeding early. If it is colon is involved, resect the colon, go in for an endostomy and the mucus fistula. Role of ERCP only when the patient showing evidence of cholangitis or a stone impacted the lower end of the ampulla, causing a relentless pain with ascending cholangitis. An ERCP can only be therapeutic. If you do an ERCP, you make it assured that you put in a catheter into the CVD after doing a good sphincterotomy. Otherwise, it's a failed procedure where you may have to be compelled and do the surgery. Regarding lap, I told you. Regarding ward, I told you. Open this thing. My preference would be a repeated laparotomies and a managed staged procedure of laparotomy and necrosectomy. In case while doing a necrosectomy, if the patient bleeds, don't get panic. If you're able to ligate, otherwise pack the abdomen, come out. That is all in nutshell. about the management of acute pancreatitis and its complications. I think I've taken a little longer time today. You will be getting your PPTs, your email IDs. I hope the class was all right today. How was it? Unmute. Anyone unnaru?
Good, sir.
How was the class, Prashant? Prashant, how was the class? Any doubt? Unmute cheyandi. You also unmute, man. You unmute.
Yes, sir.
How was the class?
Good, sir. Thanks.
Any doubt?
No, sir.
Tell all your friends to join, because only during this COVID period I can take daily for you. After that, you'll get dissociated. You will go to your department. I'll look after my work. So before that, I want to give as much as possible to you.
Okay, sir.
Madhu, open Madhu. No, unmute chahiye. Madhu, are you able to understand what I have said?
Yes, sir.
Was it useful?
Useful, sir.
Any doubt you can ask me.
Okay, sir.
Tell all your friends to join.
Okay, sir.
Tomorrow, what are we talking on? We are talking on chronic pancreatitis tomorrow. 2 more cases will go for pancreas. After that, I'll go to liver. Thank you. Bye. Saurabh.
Yes, sir.
Saurabh. Satya.
Yes, sir.
Was it useful, man?
Yes, sir.
What are you doing?
Sir.
Could you understand everything?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Ask all your friends to join. Okay.
Yes, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay. All the best. We'll see you tomorrow.